I'm honestly very direct about it. I'm like, look, your business is not really that different from this other business that's in a totally different space. You show me your launch plan, I will show you their launch plan, and they will be almost the same.
Welcome back to another episode of the Revenue Reimagined podcast. We are stoked to have with us today Derek Osgood. He is a former marketing exec turned founder who's building Ignition, which is a collaborative GTM platform for product and marketing teams. Here's the cool part. Prior to founding Ignition, Derek was an early hire at Rippling, where he helped scale that company to 20 million in ARR. As a product marketing leader everywhere, from startups to major brands, think cool things like PlayStation, Derek's launched over 100 products that have generated over $1 billion in revenue. Small little number.
Did
Now
you
he's
say
building
B?
the platform. Billion with a B. Don't interrupt me. Now he's building the platform that he wished he had along the way, and we're going to hear all about it. Derek, thanks for joining the show, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Excited to jam on all this stuff.
Thanks for joining. Really cool. I'm super interested to hear as we go through this product management marketing platform combination. But before we jump into that, what we like to talk to founders about is the origin story. Like, why did you start it? You talked about it. You wish you had it as you were growing up. So tell the audience a bit about that origin story and that aha moment you had.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I had been marinating on Ignition for a long time, and I've always wanted to be a founder. Like, I actually went into product marketing and product management because I felt like it was one of the roles that like gave me enough of a cross-functional view across the way that the whole company was operating that it would tee me up well to like when I did step into the founder seat to have a good holistic view of the business. And so I always knew that I wanted to do this. I didn't know what I wanted to start. And I think, like the aha moment for me around Ignition kind of came from a couple of things. So like one was I have worked across like a range of different shapes and sizes of companies and a couple of different industries. And I've seen kind of like that this process of building and launching products is pretty consistent across all of them. Every company in every industry thinks that their process is like a special snowflake, but the reality is like there's slight little nuances to it, but ultimately it's pretty much the same process across all of them. And I've been able to kind of abstract that into a process that I've been able to take from each of those stops to the other companies. And so, I think like two things kind of triggered Ignition for me. One was, before I ever even actually started thinking about this as Ignition, I realized that I had this like, everybody's got their launch checklist, which is kind of like the breakdown of all the things you need to do in order to get something to market. And I was realizing I was building this process with the same checklist at all these different companies, and I was working at all of them. But every single line in that checklist was like a different, it's not just a task that you're ticking off. Like there's work that hangs off of that. And there's actually effort. You need to, like there's a checklist item for, go collect competitive research. And it's like, okay, that's a lot of work that goes into ticking that one line item off. And all of those different things happen in different tools. And so you have this kind of like the person who's leading the launch ends up kind of stitching all this stuff together, and they have to go do all these different work streams in all these different tools and then somehow aggregate that into some holistic picture of what is going on with that launch so that they can actually enable all the sales and success and other teams that need to be able to sell the thing. And I was like, it's stupid for me to be jumping between all these different tools when like this is one consistent workflow that is used at every single company in every single shape and size, and all the steps are pretty much the same. And so I was like, look, there should be a platform where you can actually just usher something from concept through to launch and create that repeatable process and do all the work involved. But then the other aha moment for me was I realized how painful it was doing the enablement work around this and getting information to the different teams that need info at different stages of the launch process. Because, as the product marketer or the product manager who's leading this process, like you are responsible for making sure that every team in the company knows exactly what they're responsible for, what is going on with the launch, what the strategy is, what content's available to them to go sell it. And each of them needs a slightly different subset of that like much bigger launch plan that you've created. And so you end up basically copy and pasting 500 different versions of the exact same update to all these different teams and sending out all these status update emails. So the first version of Ignition was actually just like the launch plan doc kind of modularized into its bits and pieces and making it really easy to share those bits and pieces independently with the different teams that needed just different subsets of the plan information. And, the plan was always to kind of like turn that into each of those modules being a workflow that actually helped you to do the work to populate it. So it was kind of just like, realizing that I was spending way too much time on this stuff. It was a problem that like every single other product marketer, every single other product manager I was talking to had. I did, 100 plus user interviews before actually, even concepting anything and building anything. And everybody had the same problems. Nobody really had any tools. Product marketing was a very underserved team within companies in terms of tools. They really don't have anything. And so, I just realized that there was an opportunity there, and like I was passionate about the problem and wanted to go build something.
So you talked about something that I think we talk about all the time as well, is like everyone thinks, whether it's product, their go-to-market motion, marketing, that they're this like special snowflake. I love that you use that term, by the way. In reality, to your point, they're not. A lot of things are fairly consistent, maybe some slight nuances. When you're working with Ignition customers, how do you tell them? Because like this comes across in every part of the GTM. Like, how do you tell them that they're actually not that special of a snowflake without calling their baby ugly, so to speak?
Yep. I mean,
what does that look like?
I'm honestly very direct about it. I'm like, look, your business is not really that different from this other business that's in a totally different space. You show me your launch plan, I will show you their launch plan, and they will be almost the same. And, basically like I just have that frank conversation with them, and I'm like, look, like your process isn't really that different. The challenging thing is the way that you've architected your process and the way that you have customized it to your specific semantics and your specific tooling and workflow that ends up confusing everybody. And it's actually one of the fundamental things that like causes launch processes to be ineffective in companies, is that they try and kind of like build this whole thing from scratch. And it ends up confusing all the people who have to consume the information within that launch process. It's like if every single PM or PMM within the company has a different way of running their process and a different way of talking about their launch, there's no way that like a salesperson who needs to talk to customers about it is going to know how to navigate that complexity and what information is relevant to them. So I kind of have that conversation with a lot of these companies. And I'm like a big believer that ways of working, in kind of modern companies, like ways of working get shaped by the tools that companies use. And I think that like a big reason that the launch process 100%. Is broken within companies is because there is no tool that has helped to standardize and like codify the process for these companies. And, like sales teams have become relatively standardized in the way that they work now because of the advent of CRMs and like how that helps shape sales pipelines. Yeah. And there's nothing like that for the like build and launch process.
Yeah, you kind of have to have the process. Plus, when you can go back to your customer and say, I interviewed 100 plus product marketers, and like, I know you think you're different, but this is kind of like the recurring theme. We talk to founders a lot about this as well. In the go-to-market motion, they think, they're special, or they're having a challenge because they can't get top of funnel. Like, oh, we have this product that we can't get top of funnel. It's like, no, there's some fundamental, basic, foundational things, and a lot of it does end up coming down to process and how do you execute on the process. So you were talking about something, but it's interesting because a lot of people wouldn't be so direct. So what we see a lot with founders is the best founders are the ones that are making a good execution process challenge assumptions. So in the early stages, I'm sure you got tons of people telling you how to do it, what the best practices are. What's one of those that you ignored and like was successful in that, when you ignored it?
Yeah, I mean, like we've built relatively opinionated software. So like, when you look at our process, like we have a lot of flexibility to it. But, I think if you looked at the very earliest days of Ignition, for example, using just one subset of what we do is like task management. People were asking for task management. They wanted like this infinitely flexible task manager because that was what they were familiar with, right? Like they were familiar with building this process fully custom in Asana or Monday or whatever they were using. And we were like, look, that's really not the right way to do this. The reason that you want that infinite flexibility is because you don't have a process and you need to be able to adapt that process to, iteration as you kind of refine it. And we were like, look, like the right way of doing this is actually have a codified process, which is what we give you out of the box. And so we actually built some of that flexibility in so that you can still customize our process a bit, but we were a bit more rigid than, like your traditional horizontal, just freeform, do anything project management tool. And we were like, look, like that's not the right way of doing it. It's what's breaking your process, because if you have infinite flexibility, what you're doing is you're inviting every single person to create their own version of the process. And inside your company, you're going to have no standardization and you're going to have no consistent workflow. So basically, like that was one of the really early ones that we challenged a lot, and we still do. But there's a lot of those along the way. Like we are constantly kind of challenging people's existing beliefs around what the launch process should look like.
Like you are speaking my language so much right now, because we talk a lot about process. And to your point, we use Monday. We're not launching products, but we use Monday for everything we do. And if anyone could go in and change the variables and change the dates and change the quality, like there is no process. The process is whatever I want to make the process, which subverts the whole point of having a process. So I love that you're doing that, and you're forcing this rigidity, so to speak, of like, if you're going to launch a product, you have to follow a strict, rigid process, not there's an outlier. Because if there's an exception for something, and listen, there's a little bit of gray area, but generally speaking, if there's an exception for something, there's an exception for everything. And we're always going to find an excuse to change it. I'd love to talk a little bit about how founders take that and some of the results that you've seen from someone who, historically changes everything, right? Like they have all these mistakes and it's causing them, pretty big mistakes when launching a project, to when you do get really focused. What are you guys seeing when you do that?
I mean, it's a night and day difference in terms of both like that customer's stickiness in our product, but then also like their experience and like how successful they are as a team. We've rolled out to both product teams and marketing teams that have tried to kind of like force their process into our tool, and they're just trying to like treat it as what they're doing today. And those teams have been relatively ineffective. And like, to be quite frank, like I've seen a lot of those teams actually get laid off versus some of the teams that like have really bought into the way of working that we're giving them. And they actually like understand the process and they apply it. Those teams are wildly successful. And you see like, I mean, one of our customers, like MRI Software, they're a large real estate development firm, they've seen their team grow 8x over the last, like year. And it's largely, and they attribute a huge portion of that to the success that they've had in using our product and how it's helped to cut onboarding time for new hires from 8 months to 1 month, and how it's helped to scale process across a fully distributed team that like had a bunch of skill gaps when when people were getting onboarded. And so I like it has a massive difference, and it's tough to it's obviously tough to shape people's behavior in a way where like they will just like 100% buy in out of the gate. And there's a whole implementation process that we go through with people to make sure that like they are successful with that. But it's night and day, honestly. And like the people that buy into it, they see improvements in win rates, they see improvements in sales velocity, they see improvements in like across the board. Because when you think about the launch process, it drives so much downstream customer success and sales success that it actually impacts the business really materially.
I think, and Dale, I'm sorry, I know it's your turn to talk, but you just said something that I don't think a lot of people realize, that when you're looking at launching a product, it touches everything and really impacts the sales process. Most sales professionals who've never had anything to do with product, right? They get hired, the product's there, we just go out and sell it. Don't understand that how you launch a product, how you build a product, how you market a product has so much to do with the sales process and how you sell a product, that I almost wish you had to have this exposure, right? Like I talk to everyone who comes into a company, regardless of whether they're in sales or product or engineering, should have to be a BDR for a day to really understand what it's like for customers. But it's almost like flip it, like understand what product goes through and how what you're selling even got built before you're out there selling it. People buy from people. That's why companies who invest in meaningful connections win. The best part, gifting doesn't have to be expensive to drive results, just thoughtful. Sendoso's intelligent gifting platform is designed to boost personalized engagement throughout the entire sales process. Trust me, I led sales for a Sendoso competitor, and I could tell you, no one does gifting better than Sendoso. If you're looking for a proven way to win and retain more customers, visit sendoso.com.
Yeah. One, and on top of that, I mean, it's like salespeople, when a customer asks for a feature and they lob it back to the product team, like most of the time that ends up being a black hole, right? Like the product team product team goes and they put it on the road.
We'll submit a feature request.
Yeah. And like, you're like, okay, well, this is never going to happen, whatever. And
yeah,
that deal languishes, and maybe it gets closed, lost, and you never have any reason to go back to that person because when it launches, you've forgotten about that customer. But for example, one small little feature that we have is, as the product team builds out their roadmap, when a feature is marked as done, we actually go back to the deal owners in the CRM and we ping them and we say, hey, these 4 deals that you're responsible for just got unblocked because this feature shipped, whether they're closed lost or they're closed won. That gives you an opportunity to upsell that customer if they're already a customer. It gives you an opportunity to close that customer if they're open pipeline. It gives you an opportunity to go touch that closed lost customer and say, hey, this thing that you were asking for that was a blocker to you buying us 6 months ago, it's live now. We should re-engage. Like those are direct impacts on your sales process and revenue that you could capture that you otherwise are losing.
And I think that's why a lot of people aren't like bringing product and product marketing into the revenue stream. Like people have to understand, like so much of this stuff is connected. Like they think, oh, it's just sales, or oh, it's just marketing. Now they're realizing, oh, you really do need customer success. Oh, we really do need marketing. Product, and you got to make sure that evolution and that the communication stream is happening. We were talking on another podcast today, and talking about how everything gets so siloed. And I think if you look at the GTM function, like product needs to be in the GTM function, right? It can't be sitting on the outside, kind of like where CS was sitting on the outside, product was sitting on the outside. But you guys have such a big impact on the overall like revenue stream. And if you could learn if we could learn as businesses to tie it back in, it'd be a lot more powerful. So I really do like that.
It's like the old Peter Drucker quote that like everything a company does is either innovation or marketing. I think it applies here. And, I think like I bucket product into being a go-to-market function. Like it is ultimately, you're doing innovation as well. Like product kind of straddles both, but in reality, like you're a marketing function. You're responsible for identifying what customers need and building it and then delivering it to them. And so, I think like companies need to think much more holistically than they do today about these like fiefdoms and how those actually contribute into the aggregate go-to-market function, which is how are you delivering value to customers and capturing revenue?
So much. So this would be interesting. You've been a founder now for a few years. Walk us through, share a setback moment in the startup journey that didn't go quite as planned, and kind of how you navigated that to kind of overcome that.
Oh man, I mean, how many do you want?
we just want one. We could probably be here all day. I get it. A lot of our audience are founders that are going through it, and they're like, no one else is going through the problems I've gone through. When like everyone's gone through the problems you've gone through.
Everybody's going through it. It's again, no.
They're a unicorn.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones for us was very, very early on. It was like, when we went out and we raised our pre-seed round, we had a bunch of customers who had kind of pre-committed to be users and design partners and customers. And that was like why we were able to raise money before we'd ever built a product. And the funny thing is that the timing on that, like we were starting the company in kind of late 2020, early 2021. And obviously like the Great Resignation happened in like middle of 2021. And so basically like every single one of those design partners, by the time that we had actually built the alpha version of the product that we were supposed to be working with them on and co-designing with them and getting feedback and iterating on, basically every single one of them changed jobs or left the industry altogether. And suddenly we were left with like nobody to get feedback from out of the early days. And basically what it meant was like we had to go start from scratch and find a whole new batch of like potential prospects, that could be design partners, but suddenly like you have lost the magic in the early days of like, hey, I don't have a thing yet. Are you willing to give me feedback on that thing eventually once I've built it? And now you're like, hey, I have a thing, here it is. And the reaction that you get is just so very different from people, and like their willingness to actually engage at a like benefit of the doubt level with your product. So we basically just had to like go and start a sales process prior to us actually having been through the design partner process. And so we built like an alpha that like, honestly, it was pretty broken. It didn't really work very well. And like, we could never sell that thing. And so we ended up having to like kind of do a full redesign on the product after getting feedback in a really suboptimal way. And it was just, iteration was how we ended up kind of getting through that process. And then we did like a larger launch to reinvigorate our pipeline, and get us like a larger batch of people that could give us early feedback.
Thank you.
You used a word that's so important, which is iteration. And a lot of people, I don't realize that it's okay to iterate. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to change. Like when you put your foot in the ground and say, this is what we've built, or this is what we're doing. Those are the companies that die, right? Every good company out there that certainly I respect, has iterated. But I think what comes with that is like these critical inflection points or these critical decisions that you have to make along the way. And other than, going from an alpha, to a real product, like when you look back at Ignition from where you started to where you are now, what are one or two like moments that you look back and you're like, that was pivotal to our success. That was pivotal to our growth. And in hindsight, would you have done it anything differently?
Yeah, I mean, one of the really critical ones was it actually happened kind of like early last year. Is we started the company initially selling predominantly to product marketing teams, and like the thesis was like, look, product marketing teams are underserved. They are the ones driving this process. They feel all of this pain really viscerally, and all of that's true. The thing that we discovered after trying to sell to them for a couple of years or a year and a half or so was that like they didn't have budget, and this was like one of the primary things that we did not do a good job of validating in the earliest days. And actually it changed a little bit obviously when the market shifted and all that jazz, but essentially we decided to kind of then broaden the positioning and step into more of like selling to product teams and sell to product management teams as well as product marketers, because they basically feel a lot of the same pain points. They have much more established budgets. They're bigger teams. They're also just more influential within their companies from a buying power perspective. And that involves some roadmap changes. We basically paused development on all of our kind of existing go-to-market tooling. And there was a lot of cleanup stuff that we knew we needed to work on. And there's a lot of things that we kind of like let burn, like fires that we let burn on that stuff as we kind of like shifted into building some of the table stakes tools that product teams needed in order to be able to use this in conjunction with their product marketing teams. And like that was pretty fundamental for us, because it also helped actually even unlock the product marketing teams, because the primary stakeholder that they needed to get bought in was product. And so I think like that it wasn't a pivot. We always planned to do this much further down the road, but we accelerated that portion of the roadmap big time. And I think it's been a major unlock in our sales velocity, in our deal sizes, in our ability to just close revenue, basically just by changing persona. And it's like those kind of changes are typically the ones that like yield, I think, in my experience, the biggest results is like when you actually just shift the audience that you're going after, because your product's probably valuable to somebody and you may just be targeting the wrong person. So,
yeah, this was the other conversation we were just having today. And as we work with so many founders, I think part of the problem is not making that shift in the ICP, the buying persona, and potentially your value proposition is shifting as you're going through that process, right? So as the company evolves, you're like, hey, I created the ICP. My ideal customer profile is always this. Like, they don't go back through that work. They don't go back through that effort. It's like the old training manual. It's like, okay, we wrote it, ready to go. The onboarding manual, okay, it's ready to go. But you have to go through that process, at least touch it every 6 months, and look at it and say, are we still going after the right people? Do they still understand the value proposition? And now you can bring in the customer success people, like who are the most successful people using the product? Does that still map to the ICP and the value proposition? And I think that work gets left out a lot in the process.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because I think a lot of companies, like, they'll say that they're changing their ICP, but like
Right.
they don't actually change the way that the company is
Yeah.
operating. They just kind of like drop a different, target in their outbound system. And the reality is, like, you actually need to make significant changes to all your kind of core marketing materials. You need to make changes to the way that you're building your roadmap and your product itself. So
It could be your website. Like you may have to have different landing pages and like all sorts of things.
So it's
Awesome.
like we committed to it, and it yielded good results.
I'd love to hear that. I think more founders have to like listen to that again and again and again, because I think it's hard, right? Because you think it's one thing, but it could be another thing. Derek, we really appreciate it. So one of the things we like to do at Revenue Reimagined is give more than we receive. You've been gracious to give something to the audience. Let them know what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're going to give somebody in the audience free access to Ignition for 6 months, and then on top of that, like we're going to throw out 30 minutes of strategic consulting from my end, and so like happy to kind of hop on and do some coaching on go-to-market strategy, growth strategy, kind of anything that's top of mind.
That's awesome, and I think you have such a unique perspective.
Yeah.
On like from a product market. To me, we're like, what's the next evolution? What's the next, not trend, but what's that next evolution? It could be like bringing product more into the GTM. So really appreciate that. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I do view, like, and I think you're starting to see this play out a little bit. Like, you've had, Brian, there was a whole hubbub last year about Brian Chesky turning product management into, quote unquote, product marketing. And I think you're seeing this convergence between the go-to-market teams and the product teams within companies, as product teams are required to be more revenue minded. Go-to-market teams are required to be more integrated into product. And so I think you're just going to see a gradual convergence there. I think you will see a lot more organizations where they are adopting tools like Ignition, where those tools actually allow those teams to work together in the same platform, and they're actually moving away from the siloed, tool stacks that they're using today. The real magic on our end is, like, our view is that our next evolution is, we've got all the planning tools here for these teams to bring these things from concept through to launch, but we're actually integrating underneath all of that a embedded data layer where we're taking all your customer conversations, whether those are happening with sales or support or elsewhere, and we're actually using some AI to parse out insights out of that to inform what product's building, but also helping those go-to-market teams to actually, like, create the plans and content that they need in order to actually bring those things to market. So, and it's all based on replicating, the best performing conversations that are happening with customers. So you can replicate, kind of your best performing reps selling that new product that you've built.
Love that.
Yeah. It's nice to see all of go-to-market come together, and see people start to realize that it's not just sales, just marketing, just product. It is one go-to-market team. Yeah. Derek, you good if we do some rapid fire?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So if you were not in tech, you cannot be in tech in any way, shape, or form anymore, what are you going to do with your life?
I'd be back in my old entertainment days when I was at PlayStation. Like, I've always been a big fan of storytelling. Obviously, that's kind of like part of why I went into product marketing. And, I think I always had this little nagging desire to, if money time were no object, I'd be probably like making movies and turning some of, like, my favorite books into some movies and doing something like that.
Are you a gamer?
I am. I'm not like a massive gamer, but I definitely am. I think it's impossible to, like, come out of PlayStation and not be.
Hence why I asked.
Yeah.
and I'm assuming PlayStation is the console of choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Since I was like 8.
My son just got the VR, the PlayStation VR set. He's really digging it. First app you check when you wake up in the morning.
First app I check, my email, honestly, but probably email.
Yep.
What you only have one word. What's the one word you would use to describe your startup journey so far?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, a journey.
Fair enough.
Probably it.
What's your go-to productivity hack?
I'm big fan of the whole like Eisenhower matrix for prioritization. And so, I basically just, use that for prioritizing every single thing that I'm doing on a daily basis and just making sure that there's like also just one task that I like, if I have to get that one thing done that day, like that's the one most important thing and I get it done. And so, I think like distilling your big to-do list down to just one thing makes it so much easier to deal with all the other chaos that pops up.
Today was the podcast. That was your big thing to get done. Love it.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Are you an early bird or a night owl, Derek?
Big time night owl. I can't do mornings. Although these days I have to do mornings because our team's fully remote and we got a lot of customers in Europe. So
you get stuck into it. Last one, dream vacation destination.
Antarctica.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. Nice. I love it when someone doesn't throw back some island.
Why
it gets far away from you there.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I love the like icy landscapes. I think they're beautiful, and it's also just one of those things that like I'm a big adventure travel person, and I think it's a really unique place to go that like most people are never going to go in their lives. So it just seems really cool to me.
It's either that or the moon with your LinkedIn headshot.
I know, right? That's the real dream destination, but way down the road. We gotta advance the technology a little bit before I'm jumping in any rocket ships.
Elon's ready for you.
Yeah.
Derek, thank you so much for joining the show. People can find you on LinkedIn, and where can they find Ignition and learn all sorts of good information about Ignition?
Yeah, for sure. So our website is haveignition.com, like we have ignition. So you can go there, bunch of info, reach out directly. My email is derek@haveignition.com if you ever want to get in touch. Love hearing from folks.
Awesome. Cool. Derek, thanks so much for joining, man. I learned a lot. Dale always learns a lot. We're glad that you joined the show. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Derek.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
For having me.